And I must say that this is a small village, a hamlet. You see the picture of the church here. The church is no longer active as a Methodist church. I don't know whether it's been taken over by another congregation or not. And the house pictured is what I believe to be the parsonage. Now, there were no signs, but it looks like a parsonage to me, having been in a number of parsonages for a long period of time as a PK. And if it wasn't the parsonage, it should have been the parsonage. You see the last quote down here. Norman took his family to Bowersville when the state put up the sign, which you see on the right, birthplace of the Reverend Norman Vincent Peale. And his son, John, a young man at that point, says, "Gee, Dad, they haven't much to brag about here, do they?" And I think he was right. Here is a map that attempts to demonstrate where in southwestern Ohio Norman Vincent Peale had his upbringing. Like many clergy at the time, Methodist clergy at the time, he had the IBM logo, "I've been moved" logo. Norman was a shy, skinny, sensitive boy. The family moved often, starting over again and again, creating a sense of stability within the family, but not a sense of stability within the community. And there's a speculation that this led to his sense of inferiority, as he needed to continually make new friends and lost friends who he previously had made. He not only had rural roots, but he was also in Cincinnati. Also grew up in small towns in Greenville and Bellefontaine. And there was a legacy in the Methodist pastorate then, and perhaps still, of living on the edge in Methodist parsonages. One author speculates that contributed to Norman's later efforts as an adult for capital accumulation and surrounding himself with successful business people. In Norman's autobiography, The True Joy of Positive Living, you'll see that positive living gets again and again and again in the titles. He relates a pile of stories, one of which was in Greenville when he was about 13 or 14 years old. He carved his name on an attic rafter, which was pointed out to him when he visited Greenville as an adult in the 1950s, and that was brought to his recollection at that point. In the 5th grade, one of his teachers, who was using the McGuffey Readers and the Horatio Alger stories, points out to the class that the word can't, the verb can't, can become can by the simple erasure of the T. And that the lesson that one can change can't to can by his own effort. He heard the populist politician and Christian orator, William Jennings Bryan, several times, including, and here's another Chautauqua connection, at the Lancaster, Ohio campgrounds. His father took him by train to the campgrounds, and while they were riding the train's day coach, Norman Vincent Peale, as a young man, very young man, sat on William Jennings Bryan's knee. Now, today that would be called child abuse, but so, things change. Also, at least while they were in Bellefontaine, from 1913 to 1917, he went with his family to the Methodist Camp Meeting Center at Lakeside. At Bellefontaine, in his high school years, he took Latin, German, English, history, math, and science. Now, as my kids would have said, well, the history probably wasn't so hard because he didn't have quite as much to learn as they later did. More photos. Here is a photo of Norman on the left and on the right with his younger brother Robert. Robert later became a physician, and they were close for their entire life. Now, who's missing from this photo? Mom. Why? She's taken the photo, I'm sure. So here's a further photo when they're a little older. I think this photo is probably from Norman's college graduation, because of the age of the youngest brother at that time, the youngest brother's name is Leonard, Norman idolized his father and adored his mother. His parents encouraged him to make something of himself. Norman recalls, and we have this in one of the Lakesiders, Lakesider magazines, recalls in the when he's a much older man, working as a busboy at Lakeside's Erie View Inn. We know nothing more about that. He writes nothing more that I could find about that experience at Lakeside. When they were at Lakeside in 1914, they learned about the outbreak of World War I in Europe. And at the similar time, the Ohio legislature's defeat of Prohibition. Norman described his parents as two of the happiest, most down-to-earth, and spiritually dynamic persons I have ever known. Our home was always filled with joy, excitement, and even gaiety. Author Carol George, Professor Carol George, in the biography God's Salesman, talks about his growing up experience in a parsonage family. Financial resources were tight. Petty politics of the church, constant moving, the label of preacher's kid, and the resulting resentment drew Norman to believe a career in the ministry was not particularly inviting. A number of you in this room may have said similar experiences. I know I did. I did not become a pastor. But there was some religious certainty, and the emotional assurance from the family was very, very, very strong. At Ohio Wesleyan, Norman entered Phi Gamma Delta fraternity. Toward the end of World War I, he joined the Students' Army Training Corps, later now call that ROTC. That allowed him to claim himself a veteran for the rest of his life, although he never left the country during that service. He graduated in 1920, majoring in English literature. He cites these three philosophers as major influences. Emerson provides the idea of a practical idealist, providing language for dealing with a number of discontinuities and polarities, and on this hand and on this hand types of ideas that he has. William James suggests that the greatest discovery of his generation is that a human being can alter his life by altering the attitudes of one's mind. Ruth Peale, in her later years, remarks that Norman cited William James more than he cites Jesus in his sermons, which is maybe a hint toward some criticism later on as well. And then the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius affirms that tranquility is nothing more than the good ordering of the mind. Accept this good ordering and renew yourself. At some risk, I'd like to make a personal observation here. I didn't know, and some of you in the room may share this, I did not know much about Dr. Peale before I started this project. I expect I had read some of the Power of Positive Thinking and probably got pretty bored with it and put it down. But now that I've studied him for a while, I'm surprised at the parallels with my growing up years as a PK and Norman's growing up years as a PK. Now mine's 50 years later, but we both had loving fathers adored by their congregations. We moved a lot, lived in small towns, went to many different schools. We both went to Ohio Methodist colleges, and of course we have Lakeside in common. The parallels end there, I hasten to state. Nonetheless, I feel a particular resonance with this man. After college, Norman worked for the Detroit News, but he received a call to the ministry. Well, at least he believed he did, and he was invited to come back if that didn't work out by the editor of the Detroit News. He went to Boston University Graduate School, not just the School of Theology, but he also went to get a Master of Arts in Literature. In 1922, he was ordained in the then Methodist Episcopal Church. Later, much later, he talks about some concerns he has with his seminary experience. He's concerned about the ultra emphasis on philosophy and the limited emphasis on the practical ministry and how to practice as a pastor. He states the world needs more preachers than philosophers. He wanted more homiletics, that is, the art of preparing sermons and preaching. And he developed a negative disposition toward the then and still popular social gospel, and that view did not change over time. In one of his student pastorates, he got some preaching advice from his pastor father. The way to the human heart is through simplicity. Tell people that God loves them and that you love them. And that's his message. He had a number of pastoral assignments after his student work in Rhode Island. He then goes to Brooklyn, New York, where the King's Highway Methodist Church assigns him, St. Mark's Church assigns him to their satellite church, King's Highway Methodist Church in Brooklyn. Now this time, Brooklyn was just beginning to burgeon as a suburb of New York City. And Norman developed a reputation as a gifted communicator, and he had a little bit of a growth in membership during that period of time, so he got noticed. The people in Syracuse call him. And in 1927, he goes to the University Avenue Methodist Church in Syracuse. There he establishes his his final preaching style, and importantly, he pays down the debt. So he's developing a name for himself. In 1932, he's called to the Marble Collegiate Church, shown here. Now, Marble Collegiate is not a Methodist church. It's Reformed Church of America, or Dutch Reformed, as I grew up learning. But he changes his ordination from the Methodist church to the Reformed church. And while he's in New York, he has much further growth in the attendance, and he develops his platform for his national reputation. He's married on June 30th, 1930. His wife's name is Ruth Stafford Peale. You see her pictured here. And their wedding photos on the left, with obviously the bride and groom in the center. And on the right is Dr. Robert Peale. On the left is Ruth's sister-in-law, Eleanor Stafford. Norman was 30 at this time, and Ruth was 22 or 23. Now I need to to move to the second part of the multimedia here, and that is the tape recorder, because we have a story from Ruth when she is at Lakeside in 1998, I believe, talking about this time period. If I can get this to work. Gretchen. It's not on, that would be why.
The headline of the newspaper had a great big plaque across the top. Most eligible bachelor to be installed at the University Methodist Church. I thought that was interesting. It happened that my roommate was the daughter of the bishop who had sent this eligible bachelor to the University Methodist Church. So one night she said to me, Ruth, they're going to have a student party down at the University Methodist Church. Won't you go with me? Oh, I said, Phyllis, I'm too busy, I'm not interested, and I don't want to go. Well, she kept talking me into it. And finally I said, all right, I'll go. Well, we did have a good time. It was a party made up for students from Syracuse University holding this party at the University Methodist Church. At the end of the evening, she said, come on, I'm going to take you across the room and introduce you to this new pastor. So she took me across the room and held me and introduced me to Norman Vincent Peale. I like to tell that he held my hand a fraction of a second longer than was necessary. And I looked him in the eye and I thought to myself, this is going Well, it was. But I tell you, it took him 2 years to persuade me. No way did I want to be the pastor's wife of any church. No way did I want to have that as a career. No way was I interested in that kind of a life. But finally, he did persuade me. And we were married. And believe it or not, we decided it was best for us to be married in his church, that might be a way to introduce me to the congregation. So I sent out the usual invitations that you do, you know, in getting ready for a wedding. My friends and former classmates there at Syracuse University. But I found that the Sunday before the wedding, he said to the congregation that he was going to be married that week, and if anybody wanted to come to the wedding, they were invited. Well, I knew right away I had to be ready for anything. We had 1,250